You're listening to Curious Cat, the podcast that examines the shadowy space where science and the supernatural collide. I'm your host, Jennifer Holtz. Join me every week as I explore what it means to be a soul in a meat suit. Welcome to Curious Cat. There's a trail that runs from the Mexico-U.S. border north through California, Oregon, and Washington, ending at the Canadian border. A grueling test of grit and endurance, it's no surprise those that attempt some or parts of the Pacific Crest Trail are changed forever. Long after the blisters heal over, hammies stop aching, shins come back to normal, the stories of the trail linger in the minds of hikers. Is it the hours alone unconnected to the phone or social media? Is it the silence or the senses that become sharper watching for shifts in weather and wildlife? Or something else, like a hitchhiking ghost that stays with them long after leaving the PCT? The West Coast of the United States is one I know well, like the back of my hand. But as I've been learning about trail angels, trail pirates, hitchhiking, and uncovering the people that have gone missing in this stretch of trail, it's become a place I don't recognize that fascinates and scares me. Grab a bobo bar and a glass of water. Let's get into it. First, the basics of the Pacific Crest Trail. This 2,700-mile trail runs north to south along the Cascade Mountain Range roughly, crossing loamy soil, snow, ghost forests, and canoe burial bowed trees. Some swear the route is best done in a series of 20-mile hikes over the course of a lifetime, while others set out to complete the trail in one fell swoop from the U.S. border with Canada through Washington, Oregon, and California. However large the dose taken, one thing is certain. Something supernatural ranges this trail too. As hikers climb, scrabble, plod, camp, or take a 0 day, there's a compulsion to listen closely, check the trees and skyline, and check behind your back. The trail winds along much of the ancient and contemporary Cascade ranges, and those that hike the trail from 20 miles to 100 to 2,000 are changed forevermore, having traveled through untamed desert, forests, mountains, and snowfields, sometimes icy banks. For our journey on the PCT, let's set out in California and travel north in 3 parts. The California miles seem like a gentle place to begin, but heat exhaustion is the real test here. Salt and water are your friends on these miles, but the real surprise for those that don't take time to study the route is snow. I found a thorough, fantastic, and necessary binge site for anyone curious about the PCT or prepping for a go themselves. It's called halfwayanywhere.com. Please find links to their site and Patreon in the show notes. Here's what they have to say about the PCT. The Pacific Crest Trail tests mental, physical, and emotional endurance. Hikers don't have the luxury of dictating every aspect of their hikes. Nature's indifference, unexpected weather, or a poorly timed road crossing can all result in hikers quickly becoming in over their heads or dead. Before sharing horror stories from the Pacific Crest Trail, they added this. It's not unrealistic to say that the Pacific Crest Trail hike could be someone's final adventure. You could end up caught in an avalanche with heat stroke in the desert, surrounded by a forest fire, drowned in a river, or in a hitch with a drunk driver. If you have a bad feeling about a hitch, don't get in. Wait for the next one, they say. Hopefully, none of this happens during your or your loved one's hike, but it's possible. Warning, if you're worried about a loved one hiking the Pacific Crest Trail or have doubts about whether you want to undertake this journey yourself, you should probably stop reading now, or maybe you should definitely read this. End quote. Ominous, right? Grueling terrain that no one posted about in the California area, but everyone seemed to be rattled by, is a place called Glen Pass in the Sierra Nevada, located in Kings National Park. Here's what one hiker reported on Halfway Anywhere's 2024 survey. Quote, ironically, the day after Forester, when I thought I was going to be fine on the high passes, coming down Glen Pass was one of the scariest hours of my life due to the steep, snowy slope, which I couldn't see the bottom of because of how convex the slope was. My hiking partner stayed with me the whole time and talked me down the boot track laid by a 7-foot giant. I do not have a fear of heights, but the knowledge that one wrong step could cause me to fall a very long way made me inhale and exhale through every moment until I was off that slope. The worst part was no one had been talking about Glen Pass in these terms, and other hikers around us were similarly shaken up. Yeah, and they weren't the only ones. Another hiker said this, quote, the entire Sierra, I wish I'd gone to a snow skills session before the trail. Sometimes man is the scariest animal of all. A hiker stated on that 2024 survey this, quote, I had just begun hiking in the Sierras and hadn't seen anyone since 1 p.m. I crossed a major stream alone and was already feeling sketched out. That night I camped alone and heard a loud grunting sound. I was sure it was a bear and was shaking from fear. All of a sudden, a man began screaming in the valley. Every few minutes he would start screaming as if he were in immense pain. There was nothing I could do as it was dark. I was a solo woman hiker and heard the grunting in the woods. I put my earbuds in and tried my best to fall asleep. I later discovered the grunting noise was a grouse call, but I did not know about the screaming man, end quote. And another account from the same survey, though, doesn't give specifics about location. They said this, there was a time when a man was screaming that he had a gun and was going to kill everyone. Rangers were separately looking for a man with a knife who had flashed and followed 2 female hikers and tried to get into their tent, end quote. There are lots of times that make solo female hikers uneasy, from slow drive-bys of semi-trucks as they cross an overpass, to campers that cowboy or decide in a mostly empty campsite to pitch their tent right beside another person's. One survey respondent said this, I was hiking solo in the desert near a road. A guy arrived in a truck, left, and came back. He was walking around and it just made me feel uneasy. However, he didn't say anything to me. I just felt particularly aware that I was a solitary female hiker in a country that allows guns. I also encountered a mountain lion while solo hiking and had to scare it off, but I felt more scared of the man than of the mountain lion. Near Mountain Center, California, lies the Paradise Valley Cafe, and that's where someone had a scary run-in with a cult, responding to Halfway Anywhere's 2023 survey, writing this, quote, after eating at Paradise Valley Cafe, PVC, we decided to hitchhike into Idlewild. While on the side of the road, a member of the 12 Tribes cult picked us up. We had previously refused a ride from one of the members standing in front of PVC, but we didn't recognize the person driving, so we assumed it was just a normal hitch. At this point, the owner of a local store used his car to block in our hitch and then proceeded to berate the driver as he recognized them from the day before. He had tried to buy multiple knives and other supplies, but the owner had refused as he recognized him as a member of the 12 tribes. The store owner told us we should probably get out of the vehicle, which we did at record speed. Needless to say, we spent much time at the Idlewild Brewery that afternoon to get over our traumatic morning, end quote. If you want to know more about the 12 Tribes cult, check out the Medium article written by Jack Neath in the show notes. It is worth your 10-minute read. I found some creepy stories and urban legends about the Pacific Crest Trail from where else subreddit No Sleep. Here comes this terrifying first-hand encounter for a user that since left Reddit, so I can't give him proper credit. But here's his post of events that happened the summer of 2008. Oh, and those were innocent times, weren't they? Sort of. His post is linked in the show notes, so check it out. I made it from the Mexican border to Northern California without much incident. I happened upon rattlesnakes and black bears, experienced legitimate dehydration, but nothing happened that made me fear for my life. Somewhere in the Lassen National Forest in northeastern California, I walked around a bend in the trail only to be startled by two people sitting on a rock dressed in nearly all white. Their faces were dirty, their appearance disheveled, and the man had a long unkempt beard. Both seemed to be in their 40s. They looked like the couple who kidnapped Elizabeth Smart. What struck me as odd about the encounter, which all of that strikes me as odd to be honest, was encountering anybody at all. I frequently went days without seeing a single human being on the PCT. Their white clothes could be explained away by the need to escape the California summer sun. Their scruffy appearance could be explained away by the fact that most thru hikers abandon personal hygiene on the trail. After I said hello, they said nothing and simply watched me as I passed. Even that I didn't find odd. I chalked it up to them being foreign and not knowing what to say. I camped a few hundred yards off the trail that night, as I always did. Following bare precautions, I hung the leftover food I had cooked that night from a tree approximately 5 feet off the ground. Packing up camp in the morning, I noticed the food wasn't there. I immediately thought a bear had encountered my campsite, and so I began to look for paw prints. I didn't find paw prints, but I did find boot prints circling the campsite, 2 pairs of them. One of those prints led right up to the rope from which the food was hanging. I thought of the couple I had passed earlier, and everything clicked. I quickly packed up and left. My mind was racing the entire day, but I figured the couple was simply hungry. If they had nefarious intentions, they would have come for more than the food. Several days passed and my mind was at ease again. I had begun to circle my campsite with sticks to wake me in the event of an intruder, an animal or otherwise. I awoke in my tent one night to the sound of those sticks crunching. I tried to relax by telling myself that in the middle of nowhere, the source of that noise is much more likely to be an animal than a person. Then I heard frantic whispering. It was impossible to tell which direction the voices were coming from. Being in the dark, surrounded by trees, 100 miles from the nearest city plays tricks on your senses. I debated yelling out, claiming to have a gun, but instead decided to be silent and retain the benefit of surprise. I heard footsteps circling my tent and was ready to slash at whatever opened it. But just like that, it was over. No more footsteps, no more whispering. I lied frozen awake in my tent until sunrise and opened my tent to find nobody there. The only evidence something had actually happened were the boot prints, the same as before. Several more days passed and I was now in Shasta National Forest, probably 50 to 75 miles from where I first encountered the couple. The trail became more or less a goat trail. Being on the side of a mountain and above the tree line, I could see the trail winding for miles in front and behind me. I stopped for water in the rare shade and noticed 2 hitchhikers miles behind me. All I could see were 2 white dots moving along the mountainside. I immediately said out loud, "Fuck this trip is over." I pulled out my map and looked for the nearest town, which appeared to be Castella, located off I-5. The only problem was that it was 25 miles away. I hiked well into the night trying to gain as much ground as possible. I kept losing the trail and decided to set up camp, this time far off the trail and into the forest. I got in my tent and tried to sleep, but every little noise kept me awake. After a few hours in my tent, I heard the telltale signs of another bad night: the footsteps, the whispering, the sticks breaking. Sounds travel far in the absence of other sound. I knew they were close, but wasn't sure how close. All I could think was, this is messed up. This is so messed up. Finally, a flashlight hits my tent, lights up the entire thing, and goes dark. I unzipped my tent and climbed out carrying my knife, yelling nonsense into the dark. It was sort of like that cliche scene in movies where people in the wilderness hear sticks breaking around them and the camera pans around the trees because the people have no idea which direction the sound is coming from. Then I heard footsteps running towards the tent and barely made out a figure moving in my peripheral vision. I turned and ran deep into the forest. I tripped several times and ran into several trees. After running for approximately 5 minutes, I tripped, rolled, and came to rest next to a downed tree. I got under the tree trunk and just laid still. I saw the flashlight moving around in the distance. I laid under the tree for hours. I was certain they were gone, but I didn't move. Eventually, birds started chirping and I knew sunrise would come soon. Once it did, I made my way back to the trail, abandoned my campsite, and walked the rest of the distance to Costella, where the PCT crosses I-5. I hitchhiked my way to the town of Mount Shasta and spoke with the police and Forest Service. They put me up in a motel for the night, and my parents drove from Oregon to pick me up the next day. I followed up with the police and Forest Service months later, who told me there had been similar reports of items disappearing from campsites throughout the surrounding national forests. However, there had been no other reports of the terrorizing that I had experienced. As far as I know, nothing ever came of the couple. End quote. And again, I just want to let you know that story is linked in the show notes. Ranker's Jacoby Bancroft wrote about some creepy stories that happened on or near the PCT. His article is linked in the show notes. Give it a click and a read. He shared the tale of a little boy that got lost near Mount Shasta. Bancroft writes, "A strange tale became even stranger in Shasta Forest after a 3-year-old mysteriously vanished without a trace. He reappeared 5 hours later, saying he was abducted by a robot double of his grandmother, and was taken to a terrifying cave filled with spiders." Okay, that's already pretty weird, but it got even weirder when the child's grandma reported that later she woke up face down in the dirt, away from her tent and her sleeping bag, with a large puncture wound on the back of her neck. The only thing she could remember was seeing red eyes shining through the forest. That was creepy and weird, wasn't it? A robot grandma. I'll settle for my grandma, who had a sparkle, the cutest dimples, and was one hell of a cook. Jacoby Bancroft also shared the story of the crying boy from Yosemite. Here's more. Reports of the crying boy in Yosemite can be traced all the way back to 1857, when a park ranger reported hearing a distinct wailing cry. At the time, the ranger thought it was a dog the Native Americans had lost, but they soon informed him it was a mournful spirit. Their story goes that a boy had accidentally drowned in Grouse Lake several years earlier and now calls out for help. The natives warn that the spirit grabs anyone who comes to its aid and drags them under the surface, drowning them. Since then, the child's ghostly cry has been reported again and again by hikers over the years. And he continues writing with this story, Ghost Wind of Yosemite, and he ranks this the 5th creepiest story from the PCT, saying this: "There's not much you can do to fight the wind, and in Yosemite National Park an evil wind is said to send hikers to their deaths." Yosemite contains close to 70 miles of the PCT, and one of the most enduring legends in the park is that of the ghost wind. Yosemite has some amazing waterfalls, but the Miwok Indians, they believe something evil stalks the visitors who come to enjoy the beauty of the water. They call the evil wind Pohono, and it's said to lure visitors to the edge of the cliffs. Once close enough, the wind picks up and hurls the person over the falls to their death. End quote. The Anza Borrego Desert State Park in California's San Diego County holds secrets of the Pacific Crest Trail as well. This comes from Ranker's Jacoby Bancroft, who writes, "In the Anza Borrego Desert, a troubled soul wanders for all eternity. At least that's the explanation given for the spirit that roams the desert at night in the form of an 8-foot-tall skeleton. Multiple sightings. Wait a second. I've seen a lot of 8-foot-tall skeletons in Denver. It's Halloween decor that no one takes out of their yard. They end up decorating them for Christmas, too. And it stays on through Valentine's Day and St. Patrick's Day and Mother's Day. They've become fixtures in Denver yards, but I think he's talking about actual bones here. I'm sorry. I'll get back to the PCT. He says multiple sightings have been reported with people claiming to have seen the humongous creature in the desert. People have both run away and shot at it, but to no avail. Most people believe that this skeleton is the ghost of a prospector who found a phantom mine but died before he could record the location. Now he wanders forever looking for that mysterious place," end quote. By the way, that 8-foot apparition, it's said to have a lantern buried in its chest. That makes me hurt. I found a bit more at desertusa.com, who writes this. "Many believe that the skeleton is the ghost of a prospector who discovered and worked the phantom mine, which has been lost for years. The skeleton is no better off than the rest of us, for he too continues to search for the lost phantom mine, wandering the dark desert nights looking for his final resting place." This isn't the only strangeness associated with the Anza Borrego leg of the PCT. The very first report of phantom lights in the Anza Borrego Desert State Park occurred in 1858, but sightings still continue to this day. Soldiers, prospectors, and explorers have all encountered odd lights in the distance with no explanation. The lights have been reported to be like fireballs in the distance, and many attempts have been made to describe them scientifically. The first account of the phantom lights of Borrego was reported in 1858 by a Butterfield stage driver. Since then, soldiers, prospectors, and explorers have reported seeing the familiar lights. The sightings have been reported near Oriflamme Mountain over Borrego Valley and in other nearby areas. The occurrences are always slightly different, but the general description of the sightings is the same. In 1892, a prospector by the name of Charles Knowles and 2 other men were camping near Grapevine Canyon at the entrance to the Narrows, where they reported their sighting of fireballs. Knowles described the lights as balls of fire that rose up approximately 100 feet in the air and then exploded. Knowles compared the fireballs to fireworks. He saw 3 fireballs rise and cascade upon explosion before they stopped. About 30 minutes later, the lights started again, but this time they were different. The lights rose into an arch pattern, returning to the ground without exploding. The light would then reverse itself and go back to the place where it started. Some believe the fireballs are caused by an increase in static electricity in this area. Some believe they relate to smuggling operations on the Mexican border, but since the sightings have been going on for quite some time, those explanations seem unlikely. A more supernatural explanation is that the fireballs are leading people to buried treasure. Of course, yeah, buried treasure. There are stories that support this latter theory of buried treasure. One of the stories tells of a young man who found many gold nuggets in a gully within the Oriflammes. Another man by the name of George Benton found a boulder of rock weighing a ton that contained gold. He found the boulder in the Oriflammes. Bancroft also has a cautionary tale about the Shasta area. He titled it All Hail Lord Kalki, and he writes, "A lot of people go on hikes to find a sense of inner peace and discover who they are, but a man from LA hiking the PCT might have discovered a bit too much about himself. He said he was hiking the trail when suddenly he heard a woman's voice singing near Mount Shasta. He wandered off the trail and went to follow it. He claims he was kidnapped and taken to a dark chamber in a cave and stripped naked. A mysterious woman was there with unnaturally blue eyes. He reports that she gave him a gift and some knowledge, but has never revealed what that knowledge is. The man was lost for a few weeks, but when he came back, he was a new man. He now believes that he is the incarnation of a messianic Hindu god and has changed his name to Lord Kalki. The moral of the story is don't follow creepy singing women. The last story is a tribute a father wrote about his son Trevor, who died on the PCT. It comes with a wish going forward and a course of action that might keep others from dying in a similar fashion, so please share his story far and wide. I don't know if I can get through this without crying, but here it goes, and please read and share it as you feel compelled. I've put links to his tribute, Trevor's Eternal Trail, in the show notes. This is a guest post courtesy of Doug Lair. Doug's son Trevor passed away on March 27, 2020, during his PCT through hike. Writer's note, Trevor slipped on a patch of snow-covered ice near Apache Peak, PCT Nobo Mile 169.5. He was not wearing microspikes. On our research of the PCT, we felt confident he wouldn't need his snow gear until Idlewild. That turned out to not be the case. I implore everyone now and in the future to ship your snow gear to yourself in Warner Springs or to Paradise Valley Cafe. Don't become another statistic. It's not worth the risk. The weight penalty of carrying microspikes is worth every ounce. I'd like to thank Riverside Mountain Rescue Unit, RMRU, for their exhaustive efforts to bring our son home. They are a selfless group of volunteers who risk their own lives to save others. For those who are about to hike the PCT, or for family members of those who will hike the PCT, I'd encourage them to make donations in Trevor's honor to RMRU here, and he provides the link. And remember, it's in my show notes, so give it a click. I am the father of the Pacific Crest Trail hiker Trevor Microsoft Lair, who perished in the mountains south of Idlewild, California, this past Friday, March 27, 2020. As you can imagine, we are devastated by the loss of our son, but somehow my wife and I want to let the world, or at least the hiking community, know who our son was, how much he loved hiking, and why, despite everyone's past efforts, he chose to stay on the trail. We just don't want Trevor's legacy in the hiking world to be that of an anonymous asterisk in PCT lore or someone who died doing what they love. He was a man, a brother, a son, a grandson, a cousin, a friend and boyfriend to his lovely girlfriend, Elise. He had his whole life in front of him. This is who he was, and this is his story. One of the greatest days of my life was the day he was born, February 12, 1998, in Cleveland, Ohio. He loved playing sports as a child, but soon realized he didn't possess the dexterity and speed to compete as an athlete, so he turned his interest and energy to academics, where he excelled. And although we relocated to Texas in 2010 due to the recession, we still cheered on and watched our beloved Ohio State Buckeyes on Saturdays. Some of my fondest memories I have with Trevor are the times we spent watching our team as we proudly donned the school colors of scarlet and gray. The 2010 move of the family to Texas for a new career opportunity was tough on 12-year-old Trevor. He threw himself into academics and video games as a mechanism to deal with the sorrow of leaving everything behind in Ohio. Trevor was introduced to hiking in 2015 when a friend invited him on a trip to Yosemite National Park. They day hiked more than 50 miles in 3 days. He walked away in love with the hiking and instantly knew that he wanted it to be a mainstay in his life, to climb to mountain peaks and see the soul of our planet. It was as if the world that had existed before had only been visible to him in black and white, and now suddenly everything had turned to vibrant colors. He loved the beauty of the trail, the experience, and the solitude. He loved the endorphin rush of a physically exhausting climb. He loved hiking by himself. He loved hiking with others. He loved the trail. Shortly after his trip to Yosemite, he immediately began planning his first overnight backpacking trip with his close friend Alfredo. The flu prevented Alfredo from making the trip with him, and thus began my love of hiking with my son. I served as his backup and went from couch to AT in 12 hours. We were completely ill-prepared as we set off into the Smoky Mountains on our first backpacking trip. We predictably made all the classic first-time hiker mistakes. We carried too much food, packed for our fears, and off we went with 50-pound packs saddled on our backs. Trevor knew I was not in shape to do this hike when he asked me to join him. I agreed to do it to spend time with my son. He told me, "Dad, I'm getting you to the top of this mountain. You lead the way. We'll go at your pace. Stop as frequently as you need to. We'll get through this together." It took nearly 5 hours to traverse more than 3,000 feet of elevation gain over 5 miles to the first shelter. Trevor offered multiple times that we could head back to the trailhead and call it a trip, but we hadn't driven 12 hours to turn around and head home. We persevered. The trip took a physical toll on my body, chafing, exhaustion, soreness, and 2 lost toenails. And despite all that, it was an adventure of a lifetime that I will cherish forever. When it came time to go to college, there was really no decision to be made. Ohio State was an easy choice. While there, he blossomed and turned into an amazing man. He joined the trekking club at Ohio State. He hiked the Presidential Traverse in the White Mountains of New Hampshire and the South Kaibab Trail in the Grand Canyon, down and back in less than 6 hours. He also made at least one trip back to the Smoky Mountains every semester with his good friend Chandler. Trevor simply loved hiking. Trevor and I would try to schedule hiking trips together when we could, mostly while he was on break from school. Our most recent adventures included Eagle Rock Loop in the Ouachita National Forest and the Outer Mountain Loop in Big Bend National Park. It was during this time at Ohio State that he developed a passion for exercise and fitness. He was obsessed about being physically fit because he knew he would need it for something he had been dreaming about since he was 17 years old. About 18 months ago, Trevor told me of his intention to carry extremely heavy course loads over his next 3 semesters at Ohio State so that he could graduate a semester early to hike the crown jewel of all long-distance trails, the Pacific Crest Trail. I objected at first. It was a source of contention with us for several months. Then, approximately a year ago, I started buying into the concept of him hiking the PCT, and if he was going to make this hike, I was going to serve as his wingman, his trail manager, so to speak. For months on end, I spent hundreds of hours watching PCT vlogs, reading books, and watching gear reviews. I began the long process of purchasing all of the gear he would require for his adventure. Trevor had 2 main agendas during this time. First, to study hard so he could finish school early, and second, to focus on maintaining and even increasing his already high level of fitness. Trevor ran 30 miles a week to keep himself in top physical condition. We both obsessed over the trail. As the research and days passed, I became more and more emotionally invested in Trevor's hike. I wanted this adventure for him as much as he did for himself. Trevor hiked Big Bend a second time right before Christmas 2019 with his best friend Dominic. In grieving with each other this past week, Dominic told me that, quote, "Trevor and I had just finished the trail. I was exhausted and I was looking back at the mountains with amazement, bewilderment, and wonder. It's at this moment Trevor looked at me and and said, "Now you know why I'm so passionate about hiking the PCT." End quote. Trevor's need to put mileage under his feet prior to his trek was one thing, but his training for the PCT was next level. He deprived himself of comforts knowing that he would not have them on the trail. On our last training hike together, a quick 15-miler, he laid down in the creek bed soaking himself through. Trevor knew there would be stretches of the PCT that he would need to hike soaking wet, tired, and exhausted. Trevor's cadence might be as slow as 2.6 or 2.7 miles per hour when doing a leisurely hike with me, but he could instantly turn on the jets at a moment's notice. I was always in awe to see him hike at a 3.5 mile per hour cadence of steep climbs, and he could maintain that pace for hours. He was 6'3" and 200 pounds. He had long legs and a huge stride. If God wanted to create his vision of a perfect hiker, it was Trevor. Unlike most PCT hikers, Trevor knew he was not going to make it to Canada. Trevor was a brilliant computer coder. He was offered a job at Microsoft starting mid-July. So when it came time to securing the permit for a PCT start date, he knew he would have to start early. Even with starting early, he would only have around 100 days on the trail. His target was to reach Crater Lake by July 1 and call it an adventure. We knew starting in mid-March had its risks. We developed a plan accordingly. If there was a heavy snowpack in the Sierra, then he would bail at Kennedy Meadows and head immediately to the southern terminus of the 800-mile Arizona Trail. We felt our alternate plan wouldn't be needed as reports of a low snow year in California made an early start on the PCT possible. We were happy his plans were coming together. So on March 9, roughly a month after turning 22, Trevor, my daughter Olivia, and I headed to Phoenix, Arizona to spend a week with his grandparents, after which they would drive him to Campo a week later. Everything was in great shape, and then suddenly everything started to unravel. We got to Phoenix on Monday the 9th. There were growing concerns about the coronavirus, but nothing significant. At least that's the way it was when we boarded the plane. Upon landing in Phoenix, the world was changing in front of our eyes. The stock market had crashed. Concerns of the virus were growing with each passing day. That week was full of excitement for Trevor and anxiety for me. The day before we left, I told him that maybe going on the hike was not such a smart thing to do anymore, but he was within spitting distance of the southern terminus of the PCT in Campo, so the yearn to start on March 16th was strong. In his mind, he was practically touching the southern terminus. Nothing was going to stop him now. His sister Olivia and I flew back to Texas on Friday, March 13th. Saying our final goodbyes at the airport, Trevor gave me a longer embrace than usual, much longer in fact, and in that embrace he whispered to me, "I love you, Dad. Thanks for all you've done to help me make this adventure a reality for me." To which I replied, "Go hike the shit out of that trail." His grandparents dropped him at the terminus on Monday morning. A few quick photos, big smiles, and some hugs. Then he was off on the adventure of a lifetime. Trevor pushed himself to Lake Marina on day 1. He couldn't have been happier. It was in Lake Marina that he connected with his tramily. The tramily would morph into larger and smaller groups of people over the coming days, but there were 3 gentlemen whom he consistently stayed with through the entire journey. Leo from Milwaukee, Janik from Germany, and Cody from Australia. The latter 2 were with him on the morning of Friday, March 27th, when the accident happened. His group hiked through a snowstorm, pulling into Mount Laguna on Wednesday. They were fortunate enough to hole up in one of the tiny houses to escape the snow. Their game plan was to stay there 2 nights as heavy snowfall was scheduled through Thursday, but they wanted flexibility in their plans and only booked 1 night. When they called the next morning to book a second night, they were told the tiny house had already been booked. They had no choice but to head back out into the snow. I spoke with his hiking partner Leo this past Saturday. He told me how miserable that day was. They were cold, soaked to the bone from the heavy, wet snow. They were miserable. trail. The group struggled unsuccessfully to find a protected location to set up camp. It was in that moment, during their first real moment of adversity on the trail, that Trevor told him, "It's during these moments of adversity, through trial and tribulation and our actions in dealing with these moments, that define who we are as human beings." Hearing Leo recount this to me brought me to my knees. I had been sobbing all weekend after learning of his passing, but this one shook me to my core. That same day, the day of the snowstorm, the Pacific Crest Trail Association had issued a statement that all through hikers not yet on the trail should postpone their hike, and that all hikers already on the trail should get off due to COVID-19 concerns. I pleaded with Trevor that it was time to end his dream, to come home. The trail would still be there for him next year, or 5 years from now, or even 10. Trevor said that until it became illegal to stay on the trail, he was going to continue hiking. "This is my dream, Dad. I'm living it right now. The views, the vistas, the things I get to see are the most beautiful that I have ever seen in my life. If I lose this opportunity now, I'll lose it forever." And so became our daily argument for the next week. I begged him to postpone his trek. I told him he was being selfish. I told him he was putting himself and others at risk, that he wasn't thinking about Elise, his sister, his mother, or me. I threatened I was going to withdraw financial support and would no longer resupply him, my last option. I think we both knew I would not do that. I said things I regret. I even lobbied the U.S. to terminate all PCT permits to no avail. The most haunting prophetic thing I said to him was this: "Please come home. I don't want you to get sick on the trail, or worse yet, die. It would devastate me if I had to be the one to call Elise and tell her something had happened to you." After about 5 or 6 days of trying to convince him to come home, I realized he was staying put. There was no getting him off the trail, at which point I would focus on supporting his hike. I vowed to myself if he wouldn't come home, that I'd at least do what I could to keep him as safe as possible with current information and good resupply boxes. Trevor and the group trudged on. They were closing in on Warner Springs, having just passed PCT mile 100. I sent Trevor a text and asked him how he was feeling and how his body was holding up. He told me other than a few pesky blisters, he was feeling great and that his body was strong. I remember him saying there were a couple of members of his family that were nursing some injuries, sore ankles and knees, but he said he could not have felt better. Trevor's closest trail friend, Leo, was nursing a bum knee after hiking several days without a break. Leo got a hitch from Warner Springs via the PCT Trail Angels page on Facebook to a hotel to take a couple 0 days to heal up. Leo encouraged Trevor to take those 0 days with him, but Trevor, Janek, and Cody were still feeling strong. Trevor had limited time on the trail. They were going to press on without Leo. While sitting in his hotel room for a couple days watching the news, Leo learned of the severity of COVID-19. He decided to end his hike at that point. I've asked myself multiple times, what would have happened had Trevor stayed back with Leo that day? His decision to press on will haunt me forever. Our last communication with Trevor was on Thursday night. They had just pulled their 8 straight days of 20-mile days by completing a 3,000-foot climb. Arriving to their campsite at PCT mile 166.5, they hunkered down for the night. Trevor sounded exhausted. He was eager to complete the last 14 miles into Idlewild, where he and Cody and Janet were planning to take 2 zeros. While in town, he'd pick up his resupply, which included his ice axe and microspikes. In preparation for the next part of the hike, he never made it to Idlewild. A friend called me on Friday to notify me of the tragic accident on the PCT close to Trevor's last known location at mile 166.5. Of course, at that time, we didn't know the hiker involved was Trevor. The news report mentioned a hiker had succumbed to their injuries before the rescue team arrived. The report suggested the rescue occurred near Mountain Center, of which Trevor was close to the prior day. He was now some 10 to 15 miles past that point, but when you're dealing with the wilderness, the word near could mean 1 mile, 5 miles, 10 miles, or even 25. I was slightly concerned and would remain that way until I heard from Trevor, but I was confident he was well past the search area. I had two thoughts. First, of all the hikers on the trail, what is the likelihood this deceased hiker was Trevor? Second, he had his driver's license with him. If it was Trevor, search and rescue would have certainly reached out to me by now. I was confident it was not him, but would remain concerned until I heard his voice. That voice never came. 7 p.m. rolled around in Dallas-Fort Worth. I knew Trevor would have been in Idlewild by now. Every time I tried calling, it went straight to voicemail. He would likely have access to internet in town. Therefore, he would most likely be on his phone. It was also about this time every night that he would check in with us via call, text, or his Garmin InReach. I started to worry. I called the Riverside County Sheriff's Office. I won't go into all the details of the next several hours, as some of those details will only remain with my family. Speaking to the sheriff's deputy who orchestrated the search and rescue, and then subsequently to the coroner, were some of the most difficult conversations I've ever had to have in my life. My life was changed forever when the coroner told me, "We have Trevor." To the best of our knowledge, Trevor slipped on a patch of snow-covered ice near Apache Peak, PCT mile 169.5. Trevor's accident was reported by Cody and Janik via their emergency GPS device at roughly 9:38 a.m. Pacific time. Rescue crews from the Riverside Mountain Rescue Unit and the California Highway Patrol Medic and Air Operations Unit arrived on site at roughly 10:30 a.m. 5 fire trucks, 2 helicopters, and more than 24 rescue personnel fought the elements during the rescue mission. One helicopter focused on rescuing Cody and Janik, while the other attempted to locate Trevor. Dangerous terrain coupled by severe weather prevented the helicopter from locating Trevor. They were able to locate a safe landing spot to drop Medic Charles Rhodes of the California Highway Patrol onto the trail. Medic Rhodes hiked and eventually bushwhacked a total of 5 miles to reach Trevor at 1:30 p.m. Sadly, prior to Medic Rhodes' arrival, Trevor had succumbed to his injuries from sliding several hundred feet into a steep ravine. I am grateful to the men and women who risked their lives to recover my son. I will forevermore be in their debt. As you can imagine, Friday, March 27, 2020, was the darkest and most painful, heartbreaking moment of our lives. The grief of losing our son has hit us like a tsunami. The unstoppable waves drown us in grief each time they hit. There's nothing that can be done to stop them. It's several days later now, and the waves still come. I yearn for the day when Trevor's family and closest friends can talk about him and look at photos without pain or grief, but instead smile and recall the happy times we shared together. Trevor was not a statistic. He was not a PCT asterisk. He was everything you want in a son. As parents, we were so proud of him. He was our child. Trevor loved hiking. He was handsome, responsible, and smart. He was going to make this great world a better place. He was convinced he would someday write a computer program that would change the world. Most importantly, I want people to know that he deeply cared about his family and friends. He was philosophical. He was a deep thinker. He genuinely cared for others, encouraging those closest to him to be the best versions of themselves they can be. Just as in life, Trevor made the same impact on others during his brief time on the PCT. As communicated to me by his close trail friend Leo, who said, while our time together was brief, it was intense. We had several deep conversations on the trail, and my viewpoint on the world has in many ways changed because of Trevor. My hope and wish is that Trevor's death can start the healing of a hiker community that has been ravaged and torn apart by COVID-19. What was once a free-spirited group who loved the trail, the community has become name callers who have hurled insults at each other because of one's position to hike or not hike. I beg of you, if there's one way we can honor Trevor, I ask that you put aside your differences and come together as a community. Okay, and that's true politically now in 2025, 5 years after this post too. That wish of a father. So I'm going to read it again. I beg of you that if there is one way we can honor Trevor, I ask that you put aside your differences and come together as a community. And I ask that you not judge Trevor for his decision to remain on the trail. COVID-19 did not kill my son. His death could have happened to any one of us in any year. In closing, I'd like to leave you with a quote from Trevor shared with me by his girlfriend Elise, in which Trevor says, "We are not individual souls, but a collection of souls of the people we love most. We are one in the universe." Be good to each other, love each other, come together as one hiking community and heal the pains by which the coronavirus has inflicted upon this community. That's what Trevor would have wanted. Hike on, my son. I count the days when we'll be rejoined again on the highest of all mountain peaks in heaven, on the eternal trail, the trail of eternal life. We're just getting started on the Pacific Crest Trail. Next week, we cross the state line into Oregon, which holds some strange, scary, and interesting stories. Until then, stay curious and hydrate. I love you.
You move like a shadow, the moon forgot. A hush in the hallway where thunder once walked. Your eyes hold a tempest the sky won't release, but I feel the pressure beneath every piece. You speak in ellipses and glances in air, but silence is louder when someone is there. I trace the outline of storms in your skin, waiting for something to let itself in. You're a quiet storm, velvet sky with a silver thorn, tides that turn in secret grace, lightning veiled in a lover's face. I stand in the hush, in the breath before the roar. I could drown in the stillness of your quiet storm. You wear your restraint like a well-cut coat, but your heart writes poems your mouth never spoke. You ache like a wave that forgot how to crash, and I ache for the sound of the thunder and still I remain with my hands open wide, calling the storm you keep buried inside. You're a quiet storm, velvet sky with a silver thorn, tides that turn in secret grace, lightning veiled in a lover's face. I stand in the hush, in the breath before the roar. I could drown in the stillness of your quiet storm. Let it fall, let it flame, let it speak in your true name. If you're holding back the flood, I'll be here through wind and mud. You're a quiet storm, but I see the stars you've worn. Winds may tear the sky apart, but I will still call you art. So come undone, let the silence transform. I will dance in the ruins of your quiet storm. And if the sky must break, let it break